Everybody knew this day would come. You know, the moment where he would hang up the whistle, drive back home, kiss Miss Terry on the cheek, and realize that the next morning he wouldn't be waking up and going to the Malmore Athletic Complex. He wouldn't be heading out to practice or going into the weight room or making phone calls to recruits across this country. We knew that there'd be a moment in the world of college football that seemed so bright for other programs, but dark in the place resided known as Titletown. And we knew that there would come a day that Alabama would walk onto the field at Bryant-Denny Stadium, and Nick Saban wouldn't be the one leading the charge. I just don't think many people thought it would come today, and it wouldn't be coming this year, especially after a loss in Pasadena where optimism seemed at an all-time high. But that day has come, and good, bad, indifferent for the Crimson Tide or for college football in general, we have to embrace it. But make no mistake, Nick Saban changed the game of college football forever. And so let's talk about it. If you are new here, though, welcome on into the channel. My name is Cole Thompson. I'm a radio show host based in Houston, and I talk college football daily. So if this is the type of content you enjoy, plus coaching searches, we're about to have the biggest one since 2007. So you want to be locked in for that. The transfer portal, who knows the surplus and exodus of names that could be leaving Tuscaloosa and looking for grander pastures elsewhere, and a bunch of other content. Simply because the clock has struck zero on 2023 does not mean we are stopping doing videos, talking about college football daily. So make sure that if you like this type of stuff, hit the subscribe button down below. Tell me your favorite Nick Saban memory through his 17 illustrious years in Tuscaloosa, or during his time at Michigan State, or during his time in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, or wherever he may have resided. Tell your friends, your family, your mortal enemies, your best of bros, the drunk dude passed out in the Publix parking lot right off of University and McFarland Boulevard. Tell every Alabama fan and college football aficionados everywhere about this channel, because we are on the race to become the #1 YouTube show talking college football daily. And go ahead and follow me on social media at Mr. Cole Thompson. That way, conversations surrounding our favorite sport never have to stop flowing. 17 years ago, Nick Saban walked into Tuscaloosa and changed the identity of Alabama for the better. And with it, he changed the world of college football. I don't like speaking in absolutes, because if in a game where it's always changing and the evolution of the sport is always on its axis and it never sleeps, you don't want to talk with a finite conclusion, just simply because anything can change at the drop of a hat. It literally is the ultimate butterfly effect of sports. One move is made and a cascading bunch of dominoes are falling in process along with it, because of it is such an anomaly. But you cannot tell the story of college football simply in this era without the first probably 5 chapters just residing on Nick Saban and what he has done for our favorite sport and for the industry, and I would say for the better. But let's just go ahead and break this down. Nick Saban, 17 years at Alabama, finally ready to call it a career. Back in 2007, that was a moment that is going to be remembered by Alabama fans everywhere. There are a surplus of instances in your life where you can say to yourself, I remember when X happened. I remember where I was or what was going on when one of these magic moments or one of these dreadful times occurred. Today is one of them, naturally, in the world of college football. 9/11 was one for a lot of people. I think back in the day, for anyone who's still alive, when JFK was shot, you remember that moment. When the Challenger exploded, you remember that moment. And in the world of college football, without question, the day that Nick Saban officially signed on to become the head coach for the Crimson Tide is one where you will remember every instance of that moment. You'll remember where you were, what you heard, you'll remember what you were doing, you remember what was the day like, what was the weather like outside, because of it just was a game changer for the world of college football. And it really is for a multitude of reasons. But remember back in 2007, there was a report that came out that Rich Rodriguez was going to leave West Virginia and he was going to come to Tuscaloosa. And then what happened was there was contract negotiations that were going on behind closed doors, and slowly but surely it became very well known that Rich Rod was actually not leaving Morgantown. He was going to stay there. Eventually, he ended up going to Ann Arbor, so it didn't really matter. His days were numbered anyways, but Alabama was back at the precipice. And for a while, a lot of people wanted the exact same mantra or notion that Bear Bryant implemented. And that was a big task for whoever was running the program at the time, the boosters inside of Tuscaloosa. They wanted to emulate the exact same persona that Bear Bryant dissolve for 4 decades plus. They wanted that to come to Tuscaloosa. And that was a lot of the hires that were being made, whether it be from Gene Stallings to Mike Shula to Mike DeBose, all of them just ties to Bear Bryant. And then there was word that Nick Saban was in the NFL and he wanted to stay in the NFL and he wasn't going to take the Alabama job. But never say never in the world of college football, because lo and behold, Saban came in. And one thing that I think you had to realize was Saban coming in, this was a program that was not at the same level that we know today. For a lot of the young kids that are watching this, and I'm sure that there are tons that love this show. So thank you so much automatically. But never forget that Alabama at one point was an afterthought in the world of college football. You know how we talk right now about Nebraska, about the way that they haven't been able to get back to their glory days when Tom Osborne was running the sidelines or Frank Solich was there, or even the Bo Pelini times. They haven't gotten back to that level. That was Alabama for a while. And so when Saban came in, not only did he go ahead and sit down with boosters and sit down with the athletic director and sit down with Bill, with Bill Battle and sit down with really everybody and then say, listen, we have to change the way we do things here. We have to be able to make these necessary adjustments if we want to be a player in the SEC. Because of so far, all we are is a team that is known for our brand and our big A, but we are nowhere near the elites of the elites. And so that first year, he sucked, plain simple. There's no other way to put it. You had to start somewhere. And I think this is a great lesson for anybody out there. You always have to start somewhere. Saban was a proven winner. He was able to get Michigan State to its first 10-win season in 34 years. He led LSU back to a national title, the first of 3 under 3 different coaches during the 21st century. He was able to implement his dynamics and his coaching prowess, and he was able to change the course of the outcome in Baton Rouge. And then he goes to the NFL, and things don't really go his way at first, but you have to start somewhere. A guy like Saban starting fresh at a place like Alabama that needed an entire makeover, and he did it within 2 years. I think people don't realize just how quickly his impact was starting to bleed through the SEC. Year 1, he sucked. You lose to Louisiana Monroe. You have a couple of close losses. You finish 6-7, and it was not a season to remember. And a lot of people at that point just kind of said, you know what? We're going to let this year slide because we know what's coming. And it came immediately. Next year, they were playing in the SEC title game, and they go to the Sugar Bowl and they play against Utah. And a year later, they win their first national title. And that was the start of one of, if not the greatest dynasties that has ever been documented in the history of sports. Alabama for 16 seasons hasn't lost more than 3 games. They've lost 3 games one time. That came in 2010. Alabama has had double-digit win seasons every year since 2008. They have been able to dominate the recruiting world. 10 number 1 recruiting classes. They have physically outworked everybody in the SEC. Saban has, I think if I'm not mistaken, 22 losses in conference play over a span of 17 years. You were lucky, and there are only a handful of coaches that are able to hand pluck what they say. If you could beat them twice, you never fell for the trap more than once, unless you were Gus Malzahn or Hugh Freeze or the great Kirby Smart, who now is probably the face of college football when it comes to coaching. You weren't able to go ahead and get past Saban once. So you took that win and you embraced it and you called it a day. Gus Malzahn, Hugh Freeze, Kirby Smart, very, 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 very lucky people. Dabo Swinney, another one. Very lucky to be able to say he got to do this against the GOAT. And the way that Nick Saban came in, I think that if you see the people and the construct and the way that things were talked about during his time in Tuscaloosa, it trickled down. The way that Saban preached and the way that he spoke and the way that he implemented things and the way that he carried himself and the way the team carried themselves was not a baseline and a standard for those in the locker room and those on the coaching staff. It carried over into anybody that worked in the athletic complex. It carried over to anybody that worked in screen design, in social media, in communications, with lawyers, with boosters, everything. Saban's way was a lifestyle, and everyone had to be on board with it because they realized, I want to be a part of something special. And special it was for 16 years. It couldn't have gotten much better. Every season, Alabama always had a shot to win the national title. Every single season, Alabama Five-star recruits immediately signing on the dotted line to wear the crimson and white. Every single year, Alabama, top 10 status, top 10 status, top 10, top 10, top 3, top 5, college football playoff berth, college football playoff berth, national championship, national championship. Like every single year, you just had a euphoric feeling knowing where your team resided. And it always shocked me that when people this past season said that Saban was going to take a step back, Saban was going to finally feel the burn of what he has dished out for years on end because of the quarterback situation, a rebuilt offensive line, young players, emerging talents coming in. This would be a year where maybe the game has passed him by. Not that he's passed up the game, but the game has passed him by. And lo and behold, here we are once again. And the reason why so many of us have talked about just his ability to find a way to build something and turn this madhouse meteoric roster into a contender that went undefeated in conference play, ended a 29-game win streak by his former coach, and more importantly, the guy who many people are saying is the next Nick Saban, and make it to the college football playoff. That's why we consider this his best coaching job. And there's been a ton. You go back to 2009, the ability to be able to have a Heisman Trophy worthy running back lead the charge against Texas and Pasadena. I look at 2011, the ability to make it a 9-6 loss to LSU, get the rematch against them in the national championship, and then hold them to the 50-yard line, never surpassing getting into Alabama territory, is special. I look at that 2015 season with Jake Coker at the helm and what he was able to bring with that rushing crew. Derrick Henry wins the Heisman. Lane Kiffin changes up the offensive tempo. Special year, 2020. The fact that he went to Steve Sarkisian and everyone was winning accolades despite missing one of your key elements. Keep in mind, Devonta Smith became the Slim Reaper because Jalen Waddle gets hurt, but Alabama doesn't miss a beat. Once again, it's regroup, retool, reprocess, and get ready to reload and go on a run. That was it. But 2023 was special. 2023 was a year that I think many people will consider a lifetime of accolades simply because Saban was doubted. You don't doubt Nick Saban. You never have. Most people never will because they understand you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to want a glass of milk, and then the warpath and the chaotic chasm of Pandora's box opens up, and you don't know what's in there. The second you doubt Nick Saban is the most dangerous words you could ever utter to a man who has literally everything to gain and really not much more to prove. I look back at Saban's legacy for a multitude of reasons because of it's not just what he did on the field when it came to recruiting and bettering players to make it to the next stage of their tenures, the consistent growth of him being able to learn, regroup, revance, but it was his adaptability. And I think that that's something that really stands out. All these coaches right now are learning the hard lesson. When you lose a surplus of talent and you have to hit the reset button, you're probably not going to have instantaneous results. Sometimes the best thing for you is to look in the mirror, figure out what's wrong, make those necessary changes for the better of your tenure. You don't have these 40-year coaches that run the same format that worked in the 1970s carry over to the 1990s. That doesn't exist anymore. And so you look at a program like Clemson right now that is learning the hard way. For us to be successful in today's college football, we have to embrace NIL. We have to embrace the transfer portal. We have to make these necessary changes if we want to be a player. And Dabo, a lot of people are probably turned off by hearing his name even mentioned with Alabama because Dabo does things his own way. Nick Saban is one of one. And the problem is that so many people are going to come out here and say, whoever comes in has to be like Nick. There's one guy, there is one person who is able to take a roster every single season, a brand new coaching staff, a surplus of talent that's either up and coming or has played very little reps and turn it into something that is lethal, something that is potent, something that is so dangerous that when you give an opportunity for him to be able to strut his stuff on the open stage, he's going to cut a curtain call every single time. That's Saban, and there's only one of him. But there's so much more that really comes when it comes to Saban. Saban changed the way that we view recruiting. I don't know how many people really follow the recruiting ranks the way that I do and most other people in this industry do, but for a long time, recruiting was about winning your state. It was about winning your area. You really did not go that far out of your realm. You went for the guys that were close to home. You tried to build from inside out, and then you tried to turn that talent to where you laid down the pipeline and you had hotbeds to where kids would come to you. And Saban completely went on its axis. He started going out to California, and then he started winning in Texas, and then he started going to places like Tennessee and South Carolina and Florida and Georgia and even Virginia and North Carolina. And he would go as far to upstate New York, and he would take kids from the middle of nowhere, Colorado, and he would take kids from Kansas. And he laid a foundation of understanding, yeah, I'm going to win my area, but for me to be a great coach and for me to be able to win at the highest honor in today's game, I have to take kids from everywhere. I have to compete with USC. I have to compete with Ohio State. I have to compete with Michigan and Florida State and Clemson and Georgia and LSU. But I also have to compete with guys who maybe you haven't heard of. I got to take kids away from Pitt. I have to take kids away from Rutgers. I have to take kids away who are on the radar for Indiana and Illinois, because of the only way that my roster is going to be solidified for years on end is if I have beds on beds on beds everywhere. And coaches started to follow suit. So the fact is, the way that we know recruiting nowadays, and you see your program landing a kid from Seattle in the state of Texas, or you see a program landing a kid from the middle of nowhere, Indiana, down in Georgia, is because Saban brought that to it. And the other thing, half of these teams that we talk about that are pioneers and industries and up and comers, you have Saban to thank for it, because if they're usually assistants from him. Go look at Texas. Texas this past year made it to the college football playoff. They won their first conference title since 2009. They also had 12 wins, a stellar defense. And go look at the names that are going to be drafted this upcoming season. And now you view this as a baseline for Steve Sarkisian moving forward. Steve Sarkisian doesn't get a chance to go to Texas if Nick Saban doesn't take a chance on him, offers him a spot on his staff as an analyst, and then eventually promotes him after a failed experience in the NFL to offensive coordinator. Lane Kiffin finally gets Ole Miss to its first 11-win season in program history. Just 2 years ago, their first 10-win regular season in program history. And now Ole Miss looks like a team that's probably going to be a contender in the SEC, with now college football expansion to 12 teams. Kiffin doesn't get to Oxford without Nick Saban. And you could say the same thing about Dan Lanning at Eugene. You could say the same thing about Kirby Smart down at Georgia. You could say the same thing about Kirk Cignetti in Bloomington, what Mel Tucker was able to implement at East Lansing for a little while. Mark D'Antonio is a proud disciple of Nick Saban. You wouldn't have made it to the college football playoff in 2015 if you didn't have him giving and listening to the wisdom. Mike Loxley in College Park, Maryland. You also have other coaches all across the country that have had implements and stops and praise and honor. Brian Dable gets his shot to make it to the NFL as an offensive coordinator and now a head coach for the New York Giants, simply because he called plays under Nick Saban. So many of these programs that feared and didn't want to play Nick Saban and realized, crap, we have to take on Alabama. You thank Alabama because of the impasse and the knowledge and the wisdom that was implemented in these coaches carried over. And I'm forgetting names that are even been fired. Derek Dooley was one. You had Butch Jones at one when he was at Tennessee. Tennessee's had a lot of former Nick Saban assistants come and make their way. But, you also have Jeremy Pruitt, who was there for a while. Not saying it was always positive, but the impact of Nick Saban was felt. And Saban also changed the game when it comes to the way that we view some coaches. Mark Richt is probably one of the most respected coaches of the 2000s. What he was able to do, the way he was able to win and to establish a great culture in Athens, Georgia. But the thing was, would we be talking about Mark Richt in a more prominent light if Saban never took the job in Tuscaloosa? Would we be talking about Philip Fulmer in a light of just pure dominance and that Tennessee is still reigning supreme in the SEC simply because Saban didn't take him out of business? What about Gus Malzahn? Would he still be calling plays at Auburn? Would Tommy Tuberville still be in the SEC? How many of these coaches that we have seen shown the door and change need to be implemented, whether they be former assistants or whether they be coaches that went against him and had immense respect for him, any one of that? How many of these guys would we think about in a different light if Saban wasn't calling the shots? Literally every single year you have seen change at helm. You have not seen a coaching staff remain the exact same. In fact, there isn't a single coach left in the SEC since Saban was hired, whether because of retirement or Saban ran him out of town. That's just the bottom line. So he drastically changed the identity, the persona, and he did a lot of good. I think one of the most biggest blessings that I have ever seen from Saban, and probably one of my favorite things about Nick Saban, is the fact that he gave second chances. Texas and Ole Miss are two programs right now that owe a gratitude to Nick Saban because of where their programs reside. And the reason their programs reside there is because Nick Saban was willing to humble himself and have conversations with these coaches that failed at major institutions and gave them a shot. And maybe it was just as an analyst, maybe it was just to come on board for a little while when it came to conversations about, just being a part of a culture. Maybe it was just because if he wanted to give them an opportunity because if he saw greatness in them. But without Nick Saban extending the olive branch to a guy like Lane Kiffin or a guy like Steve Sarkisian, where's Texas? Where's Ole Miss? Where are these programs that now look to be perennial contenders for years on end in the college football playoff without the 6-time national champion residing in Titletown giving them the opportunity? 7 if you include his tenure that he had with LSU. It's just it's something about it. It's an enigma that I don't know how to properly correlate. And for me, there is a lot of praise that I want to give to Nick Saban. Many of you who watch these shows and watch these clips know I went to the University of Alabama. I try not to show biasness because I want to be known as a guy that covers all of college football. I want to be as clear-cut, unbiased as possible because of that's my MO. I want to be able to talk about every single team in the most fitting way possible. But the only reason I have my start was because I learned how to answer and ask questions and go through media training with Nick Saban, being inside of a locker room, being able to talk to him and ask him, questions on the regular about coaching changes, about positional switch ups, about matchups, formations, personnel packages, recruiting standards. I got my start and fell truly in love with this game at a new level simply because I was able to ask questions with Nick. I was able to be in his presence. And without my time at Alabama, being able to work for a multitude of outlets and cover the team when they went to the Sugar Bowl and then went to the college football playoff for the first time and then won a national title with Jay Coker, I don't know if I'd be where I am today. And I'm very thankful for it. I'm blessed that I was able to be in his company and most importantly, know what a good quote is, know what a bad quote is, know how to read between the lines. I owe a huge debt to Nick because of my career truly got started simply by sitting in on press conferences, listening in on stories and hearing what he had to say and what it meant to be a part of something special and be a part of a culture that was different. I don't want to go too much longer because it's already been like 22 minutes in this video. The entire world of college football is changing. And I think that there's so many people right now who thought that this feeling would be a moment of joy and praise and just complete, I would say the right word maybe being, I don't know, let's say euphoria, like just simply because it's like ding dong, the witch is dead, like the witch of the southeast and not the witch of the east. Everyone in college football is acting like the munchkins and they're running down the yellow brick road, and Greg Byrne is running down the yellow brick road to find his successor. And let's just make this abundantly clear: the way that we talk about Alabama and the way that other people talk about Alabama is completely different, especially in the coaching world versus the public eye. A lot of us right now are talking about how nobody wants to be the man to replace Nick Saban. You don't want to be somebody who comes in and replaces a coach that led you to 10 number one recruiting classes, six national titles, 44 first round picks, 16 consecutive 10-win seasons, 9 SEC titles, 8 college football playoff appearances, and has over 200 wins, the fourth most in college football. Here's the deal. Coaches are built different than us. That's why you and I reside on the sidelines, why you and I reside in the bleachers, why you and I sit in the stands, and they're the ones calling the plays. They have the alpha dog mentality, and they have the persona that says, I am as good as Nick Saban. And there are some coaches out there that would vehemently say, I am better than Nick Saban, and I know that I can be better than Nick Saban. And they want the challenge to be the one who comes in right after and absolutely carries the same torch and does what he did because they believe that they can. But for me, right now, when it comes to that process, Byrne's going to be fine. I would expect this decision to be made probably within the next 72 hours. And if it's not, it's mainly because of there is probably a coach that said no, whether that be Dan Lanning at Oregon, whether that be Steve Sarkisian at Texas, maybe Mike Norvell in Florida State. One of them saying no is the reason why it expands. But for me, whoever does come in is going to be tasked with keeping up that same expectation. And that expectation will never change so long as the sky is blue, as long as I am still alive, as long as Greg Byrne is still calling the shots, and also as long as oatmeal pies are still getting made. Like the expectation in Tuscaloosa isn't changing anytime soon. But can we also just go ahead and embrace the fact that today is a beautiful day? I mean, it really is. Because no matter if you want to phrase it however you see it, your university, your college football legacy, your knowledge of the game changed because you simply had Nick Saban at the helm. Because Nick Saban was the one calling the shots. So many coaches have learned or embraced or tried to take something from the playbook and implement it as their own on the race to winning national titles during their time, whether it be in East Lansing, Michigan, or in Gainesville, Florida, or in Los Angeles, California, or all the way up in the middle of nowhere, Maine at the FCS level. Coaches have taken the process about what it takes to win consistently and build this type of culture and try to harbor it and implement that into their universities. And so Saban truly was one of one. He completely unraveled the sport. He made it better, even if you don't want to admit it. And he has been a huge part of your life. It's a sad moment and a joyous moment in the same time because of now we get to look back at some of the greatest times in the history of college football. And for some of you, you are somewhat at least elated that you won't have to go up against Nick Saban and immediately chalk that game up as an L. But for another reason, it's beautiful because of the game, and the game that you fell in love with was in large part due to what he was able to establish, what he was able to build, and what he was able to deliver on constant occasion. It's a wonderful, weird feeling to know that the legacy is secure. And for me personally, as just a fan, not coming from an analytic perspective and not coming from a background perspective of where my brain is, I just think that, if this is the decision he wants to make, he gets to go out on his own terms. And hopefully it's terms that he will be content with. And based off everything that we've heard so far from press releases from Miss Terry, press releases from him, from Greg Byrne, this is one where there will be no regret. And I think that for a lot of Alabama fans, they are truly heartbroken knowing that they have no idea what direction their program is going in. But sometimes you just have to sit back and smile and let the results work their way and their magic just kind of unfold the way it needs to see fit. But just remember the good times. Remember the last 17 years of what you've been able to create. Remember the memories that you were able to establish during this span. Maybe you have a favorite moment, not because of a play that happened on the field, but because of what happened in your home, what happened at a bar one night, what happened when you were out with some friends, and maybe part of your best memories that you can that you can go back and dwell on is because of an Alabama game. Maybe some of the saddest things that really hurt your heart is because of an Alabama game, but you'll remember Nick for all of those things. And that's kind of, I think, the way that you have to end this right now is that you will forever remember some of the best parts of your life simply because Nick Saban was on your television screen. You'll have some of the saddest moments of your life simply because Nick Saban was on your television screen. But no matter what, you'll have memories and you'll have fond experiences simply by waking up on a Saturday morning and watching college football and being a part of this culture. To me, that's what I take away from Nick Saban. To me, that's what I take away from all of this. And for personally, I'm excited to see what the future holds in this world. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be nuts. It's going to be completely different, especially knowing that one of the greatest coaches in the history of professional sports, if not the greatest coach in the history of sports, is no longer going to be calling the shots. But it had to come one day. Came today. Nick, from college football fans everywhere, I think that we all want to just say thank you for the memories and enjoy an oatmeal cream pie on us. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching that video. Don't hit the X button yet. Make sure you hit subscribe to keep up with all of our daily content found on Just Saying It and anything else that we post on this channel. Bye.